From the first second, imagine black water under a cold sky. A convoy creeps west, lights out, hulls groaning, sailors whispering prayers into their scarves. Somewhere beyond the last wake, a periscope blinks up, just a slit of glass and salt, then slides away. For 3 years, the Atlantic felt like that, hunted, exposed, one long breath you couldn't finish. And then, almost suddenly, the ocean flips. The hunters start getting hunted. Tonight, we ask the question the men on both sides felt in their bones. How did German U-boat captains, masters of the night, become the ones shocked by what appeared on their radar screens, in their headphones, and on the horizon? By the end of this episode, you'll know who built the trap, what tools made it work, and why May 1943 became the month the tide didn't just turn, it roared back. Let's begin at the start. When the war at sea is young, the rules still feel old, and the submarine is the ghost everyone fears. In 1939 and 1940, a U-boat was a patient hunter. It cruised on the surface to save batteries, dive to attack or hide, and used darkness as armor. Wolfpacks, groups of submarines coordinated by radio, could hit a convoy like a storm, one boat probing, another shadowing, several lining up, all guided by a controller watching the airwaves. Escorts fought back with what they had: eyes, nerves, and depth charges that shook steel and souls. But the ocean is huge. Even brave ships are just dots on a map. The battle for the Atlantic at first is a story of dots trying not to vanish. By 1942, the dots are vanishing too fast. The Americans are in the war now, the shipyards are humming, but the U-boats are bold. They prowl close to shorelines, strike in the mid-ocean void, and melt away into winter swells. The worst place is the air gap, a stretch of the North Atlantic beyond the reach of land-based patrol aircraft. There, the sky offers no eyes, and the night belongs to the periscope. In that gap, a submarine commander could pick his time, crawl into position, and fire from the surface like a fast attack boat. The returns are brutal, ships burning bow to stern, crews in boats that feel far smaller than the sea around them. So how do you shut a door in the middle of an ocean? You don't build a wall, you build a hunter. And not just a single ship, but a pack of your own, a small mobile task group whose job is not to guard one convoy, but to roam, find, and end the threat. This is the birth of the hunter-killer idea. Picture a compact floating airfield, a U.S. Navy escort carrier, often called a jeep carrier, surrounded by 4, 5, maybe 6 nimble escorts. On the deck, Avengers for searching and striking, Wildcats for cover. In the screening circle, destroyers and destroyer escorts, bristling with sonar, depth charges, and a new forward-throwing weapon. Together, they make a machine with one purpose: to take the fight to the submarines, wherever the submarines think they're safe. Why does this matter? Because the U-boat war depends on rhythm. Submarines must surface to travel and to charge their batteries. They need to meet tanker subs to refuel. They need brief radio bursts to coordinate. If you can turn each of those moments into a risk, if you can make the very act of being a submarine feel unsafe, you don't just win fights. You change habits. You slow the enemy down. You squeeze the sea. The crisis that forces this change is simple to state and hard to endure. Convoys are dying most where help cannot reach. Think about that gap again. The mid-Atlantic, far from Newfoundland and far from Britain. Pilots flying from either side simply can't stay airborne long enough to cover it. U-boats know this and mass there, like wolves slipping between lamplight. Allied losses rise. Commanders search for answers that can be built fast and used immediately. The first answer is reach. You extend eyes into the gap. Very long-range patrol bombers push the edge of their endurance to shadow the lanes. But aircraft alone cannot be everywhere, and the ocean swallows distance like a magician. The second answer is mobility. Put the aircraft where the fight is. That is the escort carrier's promise. It's not a glamorous ship. It's slow, smaller than a fleet carrier, and crowded. But it can sit on the problem, move with the convoys or ahead of them, and launch planes where land can't. One jeep carrier doesn't seal the gap. A handful begin to stitch it shut. Then you add ears. On the escort's masts and in small rooms lined with dials sit high-frequency direction finders, Huff-Duff, that can grab a bearing the moment a U-boat taps its key. Every brief radio call, every quick report, throws a thread into the air. A single bearing points. 2 bearings cross. Now your little carrier knows where to look. Avengers spool up, leap into the wind, and fan out across those lines. And when a sub is forced down, you keep the pressure on. Old-school depth charges explode behind a ship. Every run risks losing sonar contact and guessing the aim. The new forward-throwing mortar, nicknamed Hedgehog, changes that rhythm. Instead of roaring over the target and dropping big, deafening cans in your wake, you fire a spray of small, contact-fused bombs ahead of the bow while your sonar stays locked. If nothing detonates, you've missed. But you've still got your ears. If one detonates, it's because its casing actually touched the submarine's hull. The shock is local, but lethal. Above the waterline, the ship barely shudders. Below, a pressure wave stamps a steel tube into silence. Radar is the third piece. Early in the war, U-boat crews carry simple detectors that can warn them a ship's long-wave radar is sweeping the night. But Allied radar grows sharper, switching to shorter wavelengths that those early detectors can't hear. Suddenly, the darkness that used to cloak a surface submarine can betray it. A blip that wasn't there a season ago now blooms on a screen. A pilot points his nose at it. A sailor on an escort hears range, and bearing called out in a voice that tries not to sound excited. When you combine these tools, eyes that reach, ears that draw lines, and weapons that kill without losing the trail, you don't merely defend, you hunt. And hunting changes the psychology of the ocean. Listen to the difference in how crews talk about the night. In the early years, a surfaced U-boat is a shark, fast on top, faster to dive, able to choose when to bite and when to fade. By 1943, a boat on the surface is a silhouette against a sky that might contain a patient aircraft. By 1943, a captain who lingers on the radio knows that somewhere, someone's bearing needle might be twitching. The smart move is to dive, but a boat that dives too often runs out of air and battery, and a submerged submarine is slow. Hunt long enough, and you exhaust not just engines, but men. As the months grind forward, something else happens. The gap itself shrinks. Very long-range patrols get longer legs. Escort carriers multiply and begin to appear where the U-boats would prefer they didn't. Diplomatic moves are underway to open new airfields farther out in the ocean chain, tightening the patrol network even more later in the year. The effect, even before every piece is in place, is felt immediately. The blank space in the middle of the map, the safe meadow, starts to look like a patchwork of threatened lanes. But this is not a neat chessboard. It's weather and fear and chance and skill. Convoys still take hits. Boats still get away. Crews on both sides do their jobs in cold that numbs the mouth and heat that bakes compartments without windows. The difference is momentum. In war at sea, momentum is as real as steel. It shows up in which crews sleep better, which orders get bolder, and which commanders believe the next month will be theirs. By spring 1943, the hunter-killer method has matured from experiment to doctrine. A group is told to patrol a likely lane or to strike at reported refueling points where tanker submarines top up their hunting brothers. The logic is ruthless. Starve the wolves and the pack scatters. In practice, that means carriers pointing into wind at dawn, aircraft combing arcs until the fuel gauge says it's time to go home, and escorts ready to race on any credible call. It means learning to pass contact from airplane to ship without losing the datum, the last known point. It means teaching crews to trust the sequence. Find, fix, force down, finish. If you want to feel how this pressure lands on the men inside a U-boat, imagine hearing a bearing change on your hydrophones as a pair of propellers leans toward you. Imagine a pilot's depth, bombs splashing nearby, not to kill you outright, but to push you under and make you burn battery while he radios your position. Imagine a destroyer's bow turning, the hull knifing white water, the sonar pings tightening, and then, not the thunder of a charge, but the sudden, clean crack of a contact weapon finding your skin. The ocean around you does not roar. It jolts, lights flicker, a gauge jumps wrong. Valves scream under fingers. In the control room, men are calm because they must be. The captain is counting seconds because seconds are now everything. And then, May comes. May 1943 is remembered for a reason. It's not that the U-boats vanish. They don't. It's not that the Atlantic goes quiet. It never does. It's that, for the first time, the numbers and the mood break the other way, hard enough that even the enemy feels it. Convoys begin arriving with fewer losses. Attacks that once seemed routine now bleed the attackers. The areas that used to favor the boats start favoring the groups hunting them. Within days, the message that filters down through signals and rumors is unmistakable. The Wolfpacks are hurting, badly enough that the man at the very top orders a step back. What changed? Not a single miracle. A system matured. Intelligence got faster at pointing the hunters. Carriers put aircraft where land could not. Ears and radar drew tighter circles. Weapons didn't just explode, they connected, and escorts learned to work as a team in the dark, trusting the picture they shared more than the gut feeling of one pair of eyes. That is how you flip an ocean. Not with one blow, but with a pattern the enemy cannot break, repeated until a commander detects the pattern's end in a place he never wanted to see it, his own loss sheets. There is another truth about May 1943. It closes a chapter and opens the one we're heading into. The U-boat arm does not quit. It adapts, adds new torpedoes, revises tactics, looks for ways to make the surface safe again or to stay below for longer. The Allies answer with tweaks of their own. More groups, tighter nets, new tricks for night. The hunter-killer idea, tested in crisis, becomes the standard way to use these small carriers and their escorts. The mid-ocean no longer guarantees a submarine time to breathe. Before we close, take a breath back to the beginning of this hour. The convoy, the periscope, the long, unseen hand under the waves. Ask yourself, how do you make a captain, trained to believe the night is his, feel the night lean against him? You do it by forcing choices. Surface, and you might be seen. Transmit, and you might be fixed. Dive, and you might be pinned in place until your crew is exhausted and your luck runs thin. When enough nights feel like that, a single word, withdraw, appears in a place it never did before. That's the story of the ocean flipping between 1939 and May 1943, a hunted sea becoming a hunting ground. In the next part, we go from the big picture to the deck plates. We'll ride with the first great roaming groups, watch how a bearing line turns into a search pattern, how a single blip becomes a boat you can touch, and why specific names, small workmanlike carriers and the escorts around them, made U-boat captains write in their war diaries, in plain sailor's language, that something had changed. The question that will carry us there is simple. When a hunter-killer group finds a submarine, what exactly happens next, minute by minute, until a captain feels the knock he never wanted to hear? A gray sea, a carrier points into the wind. On deck, an Avenger's prop slices the cold air while a radio man reads out a single number, one thin bearing line pulled from static. Somewhere ahead, a dot on a radar screen fades and returns. The pilot lifts a gloved hand. The deck officer answers. The Avenger rolls, gathers speed, and vanishes into the low cloud. A blip, a bearing, one chance to turn a rumor into a kill. All through the first half of 1943, this became the new rhythm of the Atlantic. Not waiting for an attack, but going to meet it. Not guarding one convoy, but hunting the lanes where U-boats fed. In this hour, we ride with the first true hunter-killer campaigns, small roaming task groups that taught the ocean a different kind of fear. We'll see how a carrier named Cowhod helped starve the Wolfpacks, how Bogue turned a long chase into a textbook finish, and how a repeatable pattern, find, fix, force down, finish, gave U-boat captains a new word for the night: dangerous. By the end, you'll know exactly how a bearing on a chart becomes a submarine you can touch. And you'll know why crews on both sides started to say the ocean itself had changed. Picture the group you're flying with. At the center, a squat jeep carrier, an escort carrier with just enough deck to throw Avengers into the sky and catch them again. Around her, a ring of lean escorts, destroyers and destroyer escorts, steady in the swell. The carrier is the eye and the long arm. The escorts are the fists. Together, they are a moving trap, free to roam, free to go where the problem is. This is not a convoy screen, it is a spear. The radio room hums. High-frequency direction finding, Huff Duff, watches for the briefest U-boat transmission. A single Morse burst throws a thread into the air. The set grabs a bearing in seconds. On the bridge, someone draws a thin pencil line. Somewhere else, another ship does the same. Cross those lines and you have a place to search. On deck, the catapult crew waves the next Avenger forward. Now ride with USS Cars, summer into fall of 1943. Her group is small, but the plan is big. Take away what the submarines need most: time on the surface, fuel from their tankers, and safe rendezvous points. An Avenger finds a wake where there should be none and drops low. The pilot sees the shape too late for the enemy to hide it. A gray hull, a deck gun, men scattering toward the conning tower. The bomb doors open. These are not just bombs and depth charges anymore. The aircraft carries a listening torpedo that swims toward propeller noise. If the sub dives to escape the guns, it may meet something it cannot outturn. Below, the escorts chase contacts that feel more like shadows than targets. Old tactics said, roar over the last known spot, drop a curtain of explosives, hope you're close. New tactics say, keep your ears, aim ahead. The forward-throwing mortar, Hedgehog, fires a spray of small contact bombs in front of the bow, while the sonar stays locked on the echo. No huge blast unless a warhead actually kisses steel. If nothing pops, you still hear. If something pops, it's because you just touched the boat itself. The effect is cumulative. A submarine on the surface is fast and strong. Submerged, it is slow and blind. Force it down often enough, and you take hours from its batteries and strength from its crew. You don't always kill. Sometimes you simply make the ocean smaller for the enemy. For Card's task group, that strategy soon focuses on a special prize, the tanker submarines. The Germans called them milk cows, Type 14th boats that carried fuel, torpedoes, and supplies to keep hunters hunting far from home. On paper, they multiplied the striking power of every Wolfpack. In practice, they created a vulnerable point in the middle of nowhere. 2 boats on the surface, hoses out, engines idling, attention on pumps, not periscopes. When intelligence points to a likely refueling spot, Card steams to it. Her Avengers range far, radios tight. Imagine the scene when they arrive, a gray slick on the water, a glimmer of oil, twin shapes struggling to break free of each other. The first pass scatters the men and throws the rendezvous into chaos. A tanker is slower to submerge. A combat boat dives fast but can't leave without fuel. Even if both escape, the mission is bent. The message is clear. There is no safe place to meet anymore. Try again tomorrow. Try somewhere else. But know this: someone may already be drawing a pencil line toward you. Word of these roaming punches spreads quickly down the U-boat chain. A commander who once planned his refuel as a calm break now treats it like a knife-edge hour. The stress moves from the convoy lanes to the hunters. Every time Card's group arrives at the right spot at the right time, it confirms a brutal new math. If you starve the pack fades. Now step from Card to Bogue. Different carrier, same mission, same sea, a growing library of lessons. If Card proved the concept, Bogue refined it day by day. Her air group learns the quiet art of search, how high to fly to see wakes without missing periscopes, how to sweep a box so that no corner goes uncut, how to keep enough fuel to loiter when a contact seems close, but not close enough. Her escorts learn patience on the sonar and violence at the moment of truth. Both learn the handoff, how to pass a contact from sky to ship without losing the thread. There is a chase that crews talk about long afterward, the one that shows the new method is not luck, but system. It starts like so many others, a blip that fades, a thin bearing line, a dash to a square of ocean that looks like every other square. An aircraft forces a submarine down and drops listening buoys, simple floating ears that relay the churn of a propeller to anyone tuned to hear. The pilot circles, counting the seconds between pings. The escorts close. The first attack misses, and that is the crucible. Old doctrine said you had one good run, and then you were mostly guessing. New doctrine says, stay on the datum, the last true mark. Don't chase the ghost of where you think the submarine fled. Keep the contact warm, reset, attack again. Each pass teaches you a little more about how the enemy is trying to slip away. Hours pass. Day turns to night. Night makes the ocean huge and small at once. The men at the sonar grow tired. But the pings keep coming. The aircraft trade turns overhead. The escorts rotate to keep the pressure steady. Hedgehog salvo after hedgehog salvo arcs ahead into the dark. You don't win the long chase by one brilliant moment. You win it by denying the submarine every chance to rest, to charge, to set up its own shot at one of your ships. Toward the end, the water changes color. A slick rises, and pieces of wood that weren't there before begin to drift apart in the swell. The next detonation is not followed by silence. It is followed by air, oil, and the small, terrible things of a boat broken open. Survivors call out. Lines go over the side. The escorts slow to pull men from the water. The ocean out here is a killer, but it is still a workplace where sailors rescue sailors when the fight is done. What makes Bogue feared is not just how many hunts end this way, it's how similar the hunts start and how often the team can repeat the steps under different weather, different light, different crews. The anatomy of a hunt is no longer a theory on a chalkboard. It is muscle memory. Here is that anatomy, minute by minute. First you find. Sometimes it's HFDF, a quick radio burst, a bearing that snaps into place before the U-boat captain can even take his finger off the key. Sometimes it's radar, a small return on a calm night, vanishing when a wave slaps the antenna, coming back as the sweep passes again. Sometimes it's the human eye, a wake too straight, a patch of water that looks restless, a shadow that doesn't fit the pattern of the sea. However it starts, you turn a suspicion into a track. Second, you fix. The aircraft drops lower or widens its circle. If the sub dives, the pilot lays a line of sonobuoys and listens for the rhythm of the enemy's propellers. On the carrier, the air plot marks the circle. On the escorts, the sonar crew steals for their first lock. Fixing is about not losing the thread in the handoff. It's about the airplane giving the ship a place to aim at that is real, not guessed. Third, you force down. A surface submarine can run or fight. A submerged one must hide. The aircraft's strafing pass is sometimes less about killing than shoving the enemy under. Force him to dive when he's not ready, and you make him slow when he wants to be fast. You make him burn battery when he needs to save it. You take away his choice. Fourth, you finish. The escort closes the last mile and keeps the contact. The Hedgehog throws its ring of small warheads into the place the sonar tells it the submarine will be, not the place the ship just passed. If the first salvo misses, you don't give up the geometry. You tighten it. A hit sounds like a muted hammer inside the hull. If the submarine slips the net by luck or skill, the aircraft can still lay another line of ears or drop a homing torpedo that listens for the very sound of escape. The kill is a team effort because the ocean punishes soloists. Notice what's missing from this sequence: hesitation. In 1942, a captain might have wondered if he'd guessed wrong and shifted his search too soon. In the second half of 1943, the doctrine itself carries the crew forward. The steps are the same across hundreds of hunts. That sameness is the point. It takes the luck out for the hunter and puts it back on the hunted. While these hunts play out, the strategy that hurts the Wolfpacks most keeps grinding in the background: starvation. Every tanker destroyed is more than one submarine sunk. It is days and weeks of future attacks that never happen. Every refueling rendezvous broken apart is a chain of later disasters avoided. The submarines feel this as emptier torpedo rooms and longer trips home. The Allies feel it as convoys that make port with more ships than expected, and captains who finally sleep through a night without an alarm. Inside the groups, a different change is happening. Crews who started the year learning their gear by the manual are ending it with instincts that textbooks can't teach. A radio man hears a certain flutter on a frequency and knows it's worth a second look. A pilot sees a pattern in whitecaps and trusts his gut that a wake hides beneath. A sonar operator feels the target start to zig and tells the captain before the machine's trace has fully drawn it. This is the learning loop. Each hunt feeds the next. Each near miss becomes a drill. Each kill becomes a class. It would be easy to say this is where the story ends, that Card and Bogue proved the case and the U-boats simply folded. But that wasn't the ocean you just flew over. The enemy adapts. New torpedoes threaten from unexpected angles. Some boats try to stay under longer. Batteries groan. Crews get lean and quiet. They still hunt, still bite when they can. And yet the tone is different now. The roaming groups have taken the initiative and refuse to give it back. Even when a submarine slips away, it knows it has fled, not hunted. Stand again on the carrier's deck in winter light. The hunt today looks a lot like the hunt last week, and that is exactly why it will probably work. The Avenger's engine note rises and fades into the clouds. Down below, the escorts hold their stations and keep their screens bright. Somewhere, a captain who used to think the night was a blanket now treats it like a thin sheet that might tear at any second. This is the middle act of a larger story. Part 1 showed how the ocean flipped. Tonight, Part 2 followed the groups that made the flip permanent. Card stalking the refueling lifelines. Bogue turning patience and teamwork into results. Aviators and sailors learning a cadence that wore down even the best enemy crews. The question that pulls us forward is sharp and simple. If daylight isn't safe and refueling isn't safe, what about the hours that used to belong to the U-boat after sunset? Can a hunter-killer group learn to own the dark too? In our next part, we go there. Night ops, moonlit decks, a daring capture that shook men on both sides. The net doesn't just tighten, it glows in the dark. Moonlight turns the Atlantic into rippled silver. A carrier points into the wind. On deck, an Avenger's engine rises from a purr to a growl, while a radio man whispers a single bearing pulled from static. Below the horizon, a shadow cuts against the swell, a line that shouldn't be there, then vanishes as if the ocean swallowed it whole. The pilot lifts a gloved hand. The deck officer answers. The Avenger lunges forward and disappears into the dark. Tonight is the lesson the U-boat men never wanted to learn. The night doesn't belong to them anymore. How did American hunter-killer groups teach the ocean to hunt after sunset? And what did it feel like, minute by minute, when the net finally tightened? You'll hear the answer in 3 beats: the new night tactics, the back-to-back takedowns that proved them, and the capture that crushed morale and fed Allied intelligence for the rest of the war. First, picture the team you're sailing with. At the center is a squat escort carrier, just enough deck to fling Avengers into the night and catch them again. Around her, 5 destroyer escorts hold a loose circle, steady on their pings, each one a dagger point when the word comes. This is Task Group 22.3, commanded by Captain Daniel V. Gallery, a roaming hunter that refuses to wait for trouble to find it. In daylight, you've already seen how this machine works: find, fix, force down, finish. The twist at night is simple and cruel. Don't give the submarine the after-dark breathing space it counted on for years. Keep it under past dusk, let fatigue, low batteries, and fear do half your work before the weapons ever arrive. Night operations start with small changes that feel huge. Pilots learn the shape of a wake and moonwash, flight decks run as dim as a church at midnight, escorts widen the screen to give aircraft room to attack without crossing gun arcs. When a contact comes, the first pass is often not meant to kill, it's meant to shove the U-boat under. A submarine on the surface is fast and dangerous. Submerged, it's slow, blind, and burning battery. Every forced dive after dark is a silent victory. Batteries drop, air grows foul, nerves fray. The boat that surfaces before dawn to breathe risks being caught by radar, sonobuoys, or a circling Avenger that was waiting for the first mistake. Spring 1944. The method is ready to be tested. The first exam is brutal and public. On April 9th, aircraft and escorts working with TG 22.3 corner U-505 team. It is not a clean one-pass kill. It's a grind, multiple runs, escalating damage, then the surface, then the end. Less than 24 hours later, April 10th, Avengers from the same carrier find U-68 northwest of Madeira and hammer it down for good. 2 submarines in 2 days. Not luck, but a system finally hitting its stride. For U-boat crews who still believed the mid-ocean night belonged to them, those dates felt like the floor dropping. What makes these nights different isn't just courage, it's the choreography. A contact often begins with HF-DF, a huff-duff bearing snapped from a 5-second radio burst, or a small radar return that persists when waves don't. The Avenger dives to check. If the sub is up, guns open, and flares tear the dark. If it's down, the pilot laces the water with sonobuoys, floating ears that send the churn of screws back to the listeners. Over the radio, you hear calm words and tense voices, bearing steady, range decreasing. In the circle below, a destroyer escort swings its bow across the datum, the last true position, and keeps sonar locked as the forward-throwing Hedgehog spits a pattern of contact-fused bombs ahead of the ship. No great roar unless steel is actually touched. No deafening self-blindness if you miss. If a salvo fails, you don't guess. You reset geometry and go again. The night makes patience a weapon. This is where you can almost feel the submarine's control room. Red lights, sweat on knuckles, the captain counting seconds between pings, the battery gauge inching the wrong way. The ocean at night is not empty anymore. It is a room with too many doors, all of them watched. Now the story sharpens to a single morning that shook the Wolfpacks far more than a sinking ever could. June 4th, 1944. The same hunter-killer group under Gallery's command drives a U-boat to the surface, batters it, and then does something almost no one thinks is possible. They seize it alive. Lines go across. A boarding party leaps. Flooding is checked. Valves are hammered shut. Codebooks, ciphers, and gear that the enemy believed would die at sea are hauled into the light. For the United States Navy, it's the first time since the War of 1812 that an enemy warship is taken on the high seas. For German crews reading the after-action stories, it lands like a punch to the throat. If they can take one of us, intact, in the open ocean, what can't they do? Step back and you'll see why the capture mattered beyond headlines. A dead submarine gives you statistics. A captured one gives you secrets and a legend. Intelligence teams pore over what they've seized. Propaganda flips the script. And every U-boat captain who hears about that boarding imagines his own men dragged across a wave-slick deck with hands up. Morale is a weapon, too. Night operations are built to swing it. But the net only tightens if you keep your kill chain simple enough to repeat and strong enough to survive counters. Here is the chain, as crews learned to run it by rote in 1944. Find. HFDF snaps a bearing off a radio burst. Radar paints a stubborn blip in calm seas. A pilot's eye catches a wake that looks wrong under moonlight. Fix. The Avenger drops to listen and marks the circle with sonobuoys. On the carrier, the plot records every call. In the escorts, sonar teams brace for the first hard lock. Force down, strafe, flare, and bomb to drive the U-boat under when it least wants to go. Make it slow. Make it deaf. Make it burn battery for no gain. Finish. Close with sonar contact alive. Throw hedgehog patterns ahead of the bow instead of guessing behind. If the boat slips, the aircraft still owns the overhead and can lay a fresh line of ears, or drop an acoustic homing torpedo that listens for flight and punishes it. The last sound isn't always an explosion. Sometimes it's the hiss of air and oil coming up in the dark. The enemy does not take this beating without trying to punch back. In late 1943, German boats introduced the G-70's Zonkönig, known to the Allies as the GNAT, a passive acoustic torpedo that homes on the sound of a ship's propellers. Escorts answer with towed noisemakers, Foxer FXR decoys that roar louder than the ship itself, pulling the torpedo away into a useless circle. Gnats score some kills. Foxers steal their teeth. The duel is technical, fast, and ugly, but it ends the way most mid-war duels end in the Atlantic. The measure meets the countermeasure, and the hunter-killer's rhythm survives. Another answer comes with a thin pipe and a dangerous promise. The Schnorchel lets a submarine gulp air and run diesels while the hull stays under a few feet of water. On paper, that means fewer hours on the surface and fewer chances for radar to spot you. In practice, it brings trade-offs that night hunters are happy to exploit. Slower speeds, poorer lookouts, a boat half deaf to what's coming because diesel noise and spray drown its senses. Late in the war, Schnorchel boats do make interception harder, but not hard enough to give the night back. Behind the tactics, there's an organizational engine that keeps the hunts fed. In May 1943, the U.S. Navy created the 10th Fleet as a central brain for anti-submarine warfare, fusing intelligence, research, and operations, and tasking hunter-killer groups with a single picture of where to prowl next. The result by 1944 is a cleaner pipeline from "we think they're here" to "sail there now." Without that brain, night ops would be daring stunts. With it, their policy, and they don't stop. So what did all of this feel like to the men at sea? For the pilots, it was flying by shapes and habits. The sickly shine of oil on black water, the way a wake flares and then flattens when a boat crash dives, the crackle of the radio when a sonobuoy picks up the heartbeat of a propeller. You measure courage in fuel minutes. For the destroyer escorts, it was the discipline to believe the instruments when the sea and the nerves begged you to guess. Keep the bow across the target. Trust the ping cadence. Fire the hedgehog ahead again and again until the contact ends or the dawn breaks. For the U-boat crews, it was a night that would not let go. Take one breath on the surface and you risk a radar lunge. Stay down and you feel your boat get heavy from exhaustion. Plot a refuel and discover the rendezvous is now a magnet for Avengers. Try to drag an escort under your periscope and find yourself decoying your own torpedo with the roar of a foxer behind his stern. Every choice carries a cost, and those costs add up to a single order from the top you never expected to read. Pull back. By late 1944 and into 1945, the pattern is set. The hunter-killer groups have learned night school well enough to teach it. The names may change, new carriers, new crews, but the cadence doesn't. If there's moonlight, there's risk. If there's a bearing, there's an avenger taking it. If there's a dive, there's a hedgehog waiting where math says the hull will pass. The Wolfpacks do not vanish. They adapt, they endure, and they still bite when luck and weather bend their way. But the ocean they move through is permanently different. It has eyes at midnight. That's the legacy of this final act. After 1943, the Atlantic is no longer a place where submarines own the dark. It's a place where intelligence points, carriers reach, and small ships with sharp ears and steady hands finish the work. The net didn't close in one night. It closed because night stopped being a sanctuary.